Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Carla Prado, and I'm a professor at the University of Alberta in Canada. Today, I'm going to share a little bit about the pathways and opportunities for studying abroad, particularly focusing on the system here in Canada, as well as in the United States. And I'm going to share with you some of my experiences as a student, but also now on the other side as a professor. I'm a professor in Canada. I've been a professor in the United States. So I'm going to share a little bit of what I have learned throughout my own journey. I would like to thank the platform for the invitation and also for making this lecture available free of charge. I expect this to help many students. So this is a brief objective of my presentation. I'm going to be providing some knowledge and the necessary skills to navigate the application process for postgraduate programs. Again, focusing more on Canada and in the United States. So here I have a brief outline. I'm going to begin by giving you an overall introduction to the higher education system in Canada and the US. I'm also going to be talking about how to choose the right graduate program. We're going to talk about some tests for admission and the importance of English proficiency. I'm going to talk about the application process, contact strategies for obtaining a supervisor, financing your graduate studies, and I'm going to finalize with a brief conclusion. So let's get started. So in this slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the higher education system in the United States and in Canada. And it's very important for us to understand that the system is very diverse. We have a very large number of institutions. Some of the institutions are public, some of them are private. We have community college, and we also have the technical education institutions. And the paths and opportunities, they are very different and they depend on the institution that you choose for your studies. So in my presentation today, I'm going to be primarily focusing on universities that have a graduate program. So public and private universities that offer a program for a master's or doctoral degrees or master's or PhD degrees. And postgraduate programs in Canada and in the United States, they are divided into master's and doctoral degrees. The master's degree, they can vary from 1 to 2 years. Most often in my area, it's usually 2 years. It really depends on the area of research. And also, within the master's program, we have the course-based programs and we have the thesis-based programs. Course-based programs are more intense, so the student is taking many courses, and instead of a thesis, the student will produce a capstone project at the end. The research-based thesis programs, they are more intense in terms of research that the student has to develop, writing this comprehensive thesis to complete a degree, but the student is taking less courses so that there is more time for research. The doctoral or the PhD degree is an advanced research degree, requires several years of study, anywhere from 5 to 6 years. Some students can go up to 7 years, for example. And this is usually done after the student complete a master's program. Some universities, they allow more experienced students to go directly to the PhD program, and others can jump from the master's to the PhD or transfer, which is a more appropriate term, after a year or a year and a half in the master's program. For this transfer, it really depends on the quality of the research and also the student's performance in the program. It's really essential that the student has enough experience because the master's is really giving that experience to students. And on that note, the direct entry into the PhD is extremely rare, more complicated, and absolutely only recommended for students who are extremely experienced in research. For example, those who have intensively participated in scientific initiation programs, or for example, as undergraduate students being substantially involved in research, students who already have publications, who have experience developing publications, writing a paper, for example. So certainly it's only a reality for very few students, and that's why this is really an exceptional situation and discouraged if the student is not experienced. Now, in terms of our credit system here, the way this works in Canada and in the United States is really a way for us to track students' academic progress. So students have to take a number of credits to graduate or throughout their program, and each course is worth a certain number of credits. So it really depends on the program that you're in. Some master's programs, for example, in the US, requires anywhere between 30 to 60 credits. PhD programs can be up to 120 credits. In Canada, we see less credits. Usually each course is on average 3 to 4 credits. So one course, 3 to 4 credits. And going back to what I was mentioning, in Canada, it's usually less credits. For example, my university, it's very variable, but my university students have to have a minimum in my program within my university of 9 credits. So this is really because the focus of our program is for students to conduct research, to publish. So it's more of a intensively focus on this research experience. Again, highly variable, and even within the same university, this can be quite different among different departments. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but as you're going to hear several times in my presentation, this is why it's important for you to understand the system of this specific program you are applying to. In terms of the academic calendar, that is usually divided into 2 semesters. We have the fall semester, which begins in August or September, and it ends in December. And in the United States, we have the spring semester, which begins in January and it ends in May. Here in Canada, we call that the winter term or the winter semester. So again, started in January and then in May. Then you have spring and summer. Some universities offer classes during the spring and summer months for students who are conducting their PhD and master's thesis. They do stay in the spring and summer, and that's when they or they continue to do their research in that period of time. Most Canadian universities, they will allow students to start twice a year or more than twice a year, for example, January and September. In the past, many universities will only allow students to start once a year. So that was very important not to miss the application process, because otherwise you could only have, for example, once in a year opportunity to actually be accepted into the program. But most programs have moved away from that now, and they can admit students 2 or 3 times per year. But again, it's always important to understand the timelines where you would be allowed to apply for the programs. Now, next, we're going to talk a little bit about the academic or the university rankings. The rankings are very often used to evaluate the quality of the universities. They are important, obviously, but I think that you should certainly use that with caution, because ranking criteria may vary, and it's much more important for you to consider aspects such as the reputation of your program of interest, the quality of the faculty, the research opportunities, because you can go to a university that is extremely highly ranked, but your program is not good enough. Your supervisor is not going to be, a good supervisor. So it's much more important that you have a good experience where you are. We have amazing professors in university that are not very highly ranked, or we have, of course, great professors in highly ranked universities. But it's more important to define your goals, as we're going to talk about in the next presentation. And really, overall, I think understanding the system is very important for making wise decisions. We're going to be exploring now then What would be the wise decision? What are the determinants that you should be looking for in order to choose the right program for you? Keep in mind that undergraduate grades are extremely important, not only in the or for the admission process, but throughout your journey as a graduate student. The grades you have now as an undergraduate student is going to determine the success that you have in obtaining awards and scholarships from the get-go. So when you start in the program, those grades are used to determine whether you can or not get some scholarships. Of course, you can change what you have in the past, but this is very important. And really, at the end of the day, what I mean here is to give you some advice to dedicate, make sure that you're getting high grades that will determine not only the immediate, but also future success of your program. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about choosing the right graduate program. And this is really one of the most crucial aspects of the graduate admission process, because a well-made choice can open doors to incredible academic and professional opportunities. So first, we have to think about what your goals are. Where do you see yourself in the future? What are your future term goals? So the first step is really to stop and think about, what kind of work would I like to do after I graduate from my program? What field of study I'm genuinely interested in working on? How can a master's or a doctorate degree help me achieve these goals? It's very important for you to choose an area that you really enjoy working on. You're not just finding a program to get a degree or to move to Canada or to the United States. You're choosing something that you have to find joy in doing. And as I really love, that saying that clarifies that a little bit for us. It says, choose a job that you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. I really admire that saying. I really enjoy this saying because it's true. I tell my students you should be jumping out of bed to come to work because at the end of the day, it shows, right? When you are doing things and working with joy, you're not only bringing happiness, but you're determining the success, your immediate success and your future success. In terms of the research, the program of research that you're interested in, I think that's very important. You have to have a clear idea of your research goals, your interest and goals. Start researching the available programs. What are the opportunities? What is the university's reputation in terms of the specific area that you wanted to work with? What is the professor's expertise in that area? What are the research opportunities? Are there any courses in the curriculum that are offered within that theme for you? Be independent, be resourceful. Most of this information, absolutely great majority of this information is available online. So do your research before you identify the places where you wanted to apply to. And if you can, visit the campus. I know the resources are limited, financial resources are limited for students, but if you have the opportunity to visit the university campus for whatever reason as a visiting student, or you have family that lives near the university where you wanted to apply for, make sure that you visit so that you become acquainted with the environment, with meeting some students, meeting potential professors, understanding the culture of the place, because after all, you're going to spend so many years in the program, anywhere from 2 to 6 years, for example. So it's very important for you to understand where the place or how the place that you're going to operate. And finally, considering the costs and financing. Financial reality is really a very key component in choosing a graduate program. So consider the tuition fees, the cost of living of the city, and explore scholarship options, financial aid. Is the professor able to provide you with scholarships, for example? And are there opportunities on campus for you to work on if that's a possibility? But at the end of the day, choosing the right program is a highly personal process, and it involves careful consideration of many factors. However, certainly the time that you're investing now in this effort is really going to have huge benefits in the future. So I certainly recommend that you take the time before you apply for a program. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the tests for graduate admission. Most of the tests that are based on the proficiency of the English language or most universities will ask for the TOEFL or the IELTS test. Some other options may be available. So these are tests that are assessing your ability to use and understand English in an academic environment. So universities in the US may have a specific, in Canada and in the US, they will have a specific grade that you have to achieve in these classes, in these tests, and this is going to be specific depending on the program you're applying to. Most of them will absolutely require this test if your first language is not English. So even students that have lived abroad, sometimes or lived in a country where English is the first language, they are usually also required to take the test. So make sure that you read the criteria and see if you require that or not. It's very important, when you talk about, is it important to speak English? Can I learn English once I'm there? Well, the answer to that is no, because having a good English language proficiency is not only essential for the admission process, but for it's our everyday program success. All of the lectures, our readings, our projects, the exams and discussions that you're going to have with your colleagues, with your supervisor, with staff, they are in English. So strong English skills is absolutely valuable and it's needed for effective collaboration. And I think that especially now in the era of artificial intelligence, it's very important that the professor is aware, your potential supervisor is aware of where your English level is, your writing level is. So if you're using AI to help you refine your emails, it's very important that the professor understands your level, your sentence construction, so that there are no surprises once you get to campus. In terms of test preparation, I really recommend you to take the time. Many years ago, when I first took the TOEFL test, I didn't have time to prepare. I just, went for the exam and I failed. I didn't get the grade that was needed. I was like about, I believe, one question short of reaching the grade. And there are no exceptions. You didn't get the grade, you have to retake the exam. And then I had much more time to prepare myself. I remember I borrowed books, bought some books, did a lot of simulations, online simulations, and all of those were extremely helpful in helping me understand the test and strategize on how to answer the questions, practice the timing, which was so important. So absolutely, I strongly recommend that you do your best practicing for these tests. Each test has its own tricks, and not tricks, but I would say, specifics that you have to learn. So the more you practice and do simulations of the test, like the more you're going to be confident on you're going to know what to expect and be confident that you can answer the questions. Some programs, they also have the GRE, or the the graduate record examination, or the GMAT program, the GMAT test as well. I very rarely use those and see those. We don't require them here, so I apologize for not being well spoken here. But those are other common exams, and they're not only testing your English they're not testing English as a second language, because even domestic students have to take them. They test more of the analytical capacities of the student, the critical thinking. It's a quantitative and verbal examination as well. They are absolutely not easy tests. So it requires a lot of practice, a lot of preparation, a lot of dedication. The GMAT is more used for MBA programs. So the GRE is the one that's more used for science and arts. But again, at least in Canada, they're rarely used in the nutrition field, which, we're focusing on nutrition today, but they may be requested in our other areas for those of you who are watching us. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the most important components of the graduate application process. We are about 20 minutes into the lecture, so if you're tired, I suggest that you stop the video, take a quick break, go grab a cup of coffee or some water, because this is, in my opinion, the most important slide of my presentation. There are some key topics that we're going to discuss today, so just, make sure that your brain is ready for this. Certainly some important tips to receive. Are you guys ready? Okay, so let's get started. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the eligibility criteria and the minimum requirements. It's very essential that you understand the minimal requirements of the program before you submit an admission. So every program will require a specific degree, for example, a bachelor's degree from a recognized institution, a certain minimal a grade point average or GPA. So this is like, your grades. Usually they consider the last 2 years of study without considering internships, for example. So if you've done a master's and you're applying for a PhD, it can be the last 2 years of a master's. That's highly variable, but that's usually what it is. And there is a minimal grade that you have to apply. And some other places may even ask for specific courses or research experience. That's less often. So you have to have a degree, obviously, either a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, and then a minimum GPA. For international students, obviously, as we've just mentioned, you're also going to need to prove your English proficiency with exams. Most often would be TOEFL or IELTS. And again, each university, as I've mentioned previously, is going to have a specific standard for these exams. As an international student, in addition to that, you may even have to provide other documentation, such as, for example, translated transcripts into English, translated documentation into English. You may also need to prove that you have sufficient financial resources to cover your education, your living expenses, especially when you apply for the visa. For entering the country, they may ask for a certain or for proof that you do have money to move to a new country and get started. So it's very important when you're looking at the eligibility criteria and the minimal requirements that you're not asking your potential master's or PhD supervisor for information. So they are very busy. So you have the responsibility of seeking the information is on you. It's really for you to read all of that's available online. If there are any questions, go directly to the admissions office. Professors are not a source of information for admissions to the university. They may not even be familiar with the latest requirements. For example, they really, at the end of the day, don't have time to help you with that. So this is why universities have an admissions or dedicated admissions office. And I always say as a tip that students who cannot find the information on their own, they may inadvertently come across as not able to adapt to our system here. Resourcefulness is it's huge, and it could be a red flag if you can't find information and you're asking very simple informations that you could easily find if you had read the university criteria or the specific website for applying to the university. So be resourceful, be independent, and take the time to do your own research. Next, we're going to talk about securing a supervisor. Well, this is the most important part. Certainly, in my opinion, that's the most important part. If you have the grades in place, this is, for me, really crucial, because for many graduate programs, especially those that are research-oriented, you need a faculty mentor that's going to be supervising your program. And the search for the supervisor starts with identifying those academics who align or who have the same research interest that you have. So I always say or recommend that you start by making a list of all the universities that offer the program that you want to pursue. Next, you can navigate through the relevant departments and make a list of the professors whose research interests are going to match yours. After you make this initial list, you can dig a little bit deeper, read the professors' profiles, read their research, read their papers, and understand really if what they do matches your interest. It's also very important, in my opinion, that you see if professors are publishing with their students. Are they listing their students as first authors, for example, in original articles? In review articles, it's a little bit, it can vary a little bit because sometimes it's an invitation that the professor needs to be first authors, but also look at review articles. Are students being recognized as first authors? Are professors giving the opportunity for their students to shine? I think those are very important tips as well. And I'll discuss more strategies on how to contact the supervisor in my next slide. Next, we have the statement of purpose. And the statement of purpose is really your chance to tell the university who you are. Usually it's like one page, it can be 1 or 2 pages, I believe. And why are you interested in studying at that university? Why are you interested in studying in that specific program? And it's vital that the project or the document is well written. I'm going to talk about the projects next because there's an area of confusion that we see often. But this statement of purpose has to be tailored to what are the things that you want to learn. And on a broader aspect, you don't need to submit a specific research project within the statement of purpose. You don't need to think about a study, the methodology of study, because really, at the end of the day, professors have to have funding to do a research. So usually they will accept you as a student to work on a specific research project. Sometimes they can seek funding to work on something very niche that you may have an idea for, but you don't necessarily need to submit a proposal or think of a research proposal in this statement of purpose. I would say that it's even better for you to have a broader understanding of the areas that you would like to work on, so that the specific professor or professors that you have been contacting actually have a greater number of studies or opportunities that are available for you. In terms of letters of recommendation, this is very important, and it can be a bit different because each country, or countries, can have different cultural ways of how letters of reference are written, and it may be very different than the system that we have in Canada and in the US. So our letters and the letters that we are expecting to receive, they are evaluating your ability to succeed in the program. So they have to come from professors or professionals who have worked with you closely and can speak of your skills, your accomplishments, and your ability to succeed as a graduate student. So going back to having good grades right now, it's also important to work and or volunteer in a variety of, for a variety of fields, or for a number of individuals who can potentially be your referees in the future. So it's very important to think that each connection that you have, that you're working on right now, can really be a reference, or a person who can write a letter of reference for you in the future. And these letters of reference, they have to be written in a way that they're not only saying, well, I've worked with this student is excellent. Why is this student excellent? Give specific examples. Adjectives without examples are means nothing for us in these letters. So it's very important for you to work on that. And perhaps the person who you're asking a letter of reference from are not aware of that. So you can certainly educate, I would say, help the person in terms of giving tips or giving a list of things that you've worked together on. For example, you can say, well, this is a list. I've taken the liberty of writing a list of things that I've done while I was working under your mentorship, things I've initiated, ideas, like just list everything. So then the person who is writing you a letter has that easy, or can use all of these examples that, most people forget. So really help your referees prepare something that is very specific. The more specific, the better. Your CV or curriculum vitae is very important. It should provide a very clear and concise summary of our academic and professional experience. Some people can submit a resume, but CVs are more common in academia. You should highlight your achievements, your skills, your research experience, and your publications. If you do have any, if you don't have it, don't worry, or this is why you're applying for a graduate program. Make sure that it's very well formatted, free of errors, and easy to read. And very important to understand that the criteria and the requirements to apply within the university and within specific programs at a university can vary substantially. There are certain similarities between the processes, but again, the specifics can vary. So some programs may require additional tests that you have to do. So the best way to prepare is really to spend time reading about the program. I suggest that you create spreadsheets comparing, not even comparing, but even at least listing all the requirements that are needed before you are ready to go through this very last step here, which is the apply now. So before you apply, make sure that you have all the requirements, you have all the criteria ready, because if you submitted an incomplete application, people are not going to be, they may very well not allow you to submit other criteria, other documentations later. So you miss the opportunity to apply for a program. Sometimes you may apply before you receive your completion of your undergraduate degree, for example, because your convocation is in a few months away. This is certainly allowed. Again, everything is explained on the application website of the specific university and department you're applying for. So as I've mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about finding the right supervisor. How do you contact the right supervisor? And I'm very passionate about this because I have had so many horrible experiences, but also good experiences. And I think this is the most crucial step, is finding someone who is going to mentor you. When you're entering a graduate program, this is really crucial, because it's not only the person who works in the area where you want to learn more on, but also because it's the person who is going to inspire you, is going to prepare you, who is really going to help you get to the next step in your career. So I've listed some do's and don'ts here. I've spoken about some of the don'ts already, but I'm going to go over some of these bullet points here to try to help you find the best person for to meet not only your research expectations, but also your career goals. So initial research, have I said that enough? Do your homework, be resourceful, read. Before contacting a potential supervisor, do a very comprehensive research about their areas of expertise, their published work, their current research projects. Many professors have their own websites. So this really shows that you are genuinely interested in preparing and in working with that person. And it helps you with a personalized approach, whether you're approaching the professor by email or at a conference, for example. When you have read their work and you understand the research they're working on, you can be very clear and concise, showing that you are interested, that you have knowledge, and even expressing your enthusiasm. Be professional and respectful. I've had some experiences. For example, I remember once a student called me in my office, didn't ask if I could talk, didn't schedule a meeting, and just start asking how is life in Canada, how can I go to Canada. Like, the person really, first of all, it's not the job of the professor to tell you how life is in Canada. These are information that you can find online or in other groups. The professor is extremely busy, and it's really, like, in most cases, I would say the great majority of cases, not willing to spend the time talking about things that you can find online in other social groups and connections that you can establish, or even university websites will tell you how life is in Canada, how life is in the US, how life is in the campus, in the city that you would potentially consider moving to. So again, take your time, be respectful of the professor's time, introduce yourself. Think of it, this is not only a potential supervisor, but it may be a potential colleague for you once you're done your studies. It's every communication, always, use punctuation, check your spelling, your grammar, and respond promptly to any communication as well. Many times that you may encounter a professor who is from the same country as you, speaks the same language as you, and I think that a very important piece of advice is that sometimes we get excited because you think, okay, I'm familiar with this professor, like this is a friend for me, or this person is from the same country, so we share common experiences, common cultural understanding. But it's very important to remember that you have to keep professionalism. First and foremost, the professor is a potential supervisor. Is also an extremely busy person. So keep your respectful and professional relationship with this person. Do not write the first email in your own language. Write it in English. The professor is working in Canada or the US. They want to be able to forward your email to someone. So perhaps some people from their labs are the ones that are receiving the emails, for example. So make sure that the communication is in English, and unless the professor starts writing in your language, your common language, or they ask you or they offer you for that, then certainly do not change the language. The official email communications that we have to exchange should be in English. The professor is always also looking for your level of English. So I think it's important, like how do you communicate in English as well. And so make sure that the respect and professionalism is always there. I'll give you an example. In my lab, for example, I don't reply to these emails. All emails of prospective students are administered by my research coordinator. We get tons of emails. There's no way that I can manage all of them. So she's the one that's receiving them. So if people write it in my first language, in my mother language, she won't be able. I already told her you can delete those emails. You don't need to spend the time translating it. So this is types of emails that get screened in our lab, for example. Excuse me. And I think that on that note, I think we can move to the next bullet here and talk a little bit about preparing for rejection. It's very possible and highly likely that you won't receive a positive response from all the people you contact. That's extremely normal. I'll give you an example. I receive in my lab from 5 to 10 emails every week from people from all over the world that are looking for a supervisor. So we, for example, are not accepting students. Our lab is extremely full. So it is 5 to 10 emails of rejections that we send on a weekly basis. And really don't be discouraged. I think that this is normal. And instead of being discouraged, use this as an opportunity to refine your approach and to continue seeking the right supervisor. Remember, this step of finding a supervisor is certainly the most challenging because, again, the professor has to have the funding in place to accept you. It costs a lot of money to host or to have a student. For example, I have to have at least $50,000 for a master's student for 2 years, a minimum of 2 years, plus other costs, plus research costs. And in addition to having the money available, you have to have space available. Some universities also have a cap on the number of students that professors can supervise. So there are many factors to consider, and all of these factors, they are going to determine if the professor can or not take other students. But if you really want to work with a person, I think you can always make sure that you say, state that to the professor. How long would you be waiting to wait for example, professors are applying for grants now. They are going to find out later in the year if they're going to get it. So they may not have a position today, but they may have positions later in September or in January next year. So when you're writing that email to professors, be very specific. When would you like to start? Do you have your own scholarship, or you're bringing a scholarship? You need a scholarship from here. So be very specific, not only in the research area and showing that you understand the research area, it matches your experience. You've read everything that you had to about the professor and their lab, but also what do you want, when do you want it, and what you already have available, for example. But again, preparing for rejection, this is why it's so important to have a list of names of professors that you would like to work with. Of course, your top professor is your first choice, but have a second choice, have a third choice, have a fourth choice, so that you are communicating and go like in that order, of course, so that you are communicating transparent, like in a transparent way with all these professors, in terms of, okay, I would really like to work with you, but if not, I'm willing to, you can refer me to a colleague, for example, because again, the space is limited, but perhaps the professor has another colleague who is looking for a potential student. I have, in several instances, referred students to my colleagues who were looking for someone. And just open a parenthesis here, it's not really in the order that I was hoping to speak on the topic, but connect with professors on social media. It's every time I have a position in my lab, for example, or I have a colleague who has a position in their labs, I will post those positions online. And our social media are more commonly here in the US and Canada, Twitter for academic purpose and LinkedIn. So we less often use Instagram for sure, I would say, especially for this type of job posting. So make sure that you get a LinkedIn account, get a Twitter. Well, Twitter is changing its name now, but get those accounts, because then you're able to connect with professors who have an account, because they will be certainly posting there when they have positions available. And again, going back to the rejection is never the end of the road. Just work a little bit harder and going down the list as well. So having multiple options. So that's why that it's important. So I've finished this side. I've talked a lot about the don'ts on the other side of this slide here, but just to make sure that I didn't miss anything, I'm just quickly gonna go over this list. Tips to avoid when contacting a supervisor: lack of preparation, again, do your research. Generic approaches and messages that don't demonstrate the interest really can come across as unprofessional and very disinterested. Like, I would never engage talking to a student who doesn't even know haven't even read a paper from our lab, doesn't even know specifics of our research program. The information is available online. If you really want to work with us, you're going to do your homework. And most of my colleagues, I would say, have the same approach. And again, resourcefulness, make sure that you go the extra mile to understand and learn about the research program. A professional communication, avoid using informal, disrespectful language. I have some examples here of horrible emails that I've received in terms of, like, you have to respect the professor's time, and keeping the communication professional, respectful, in terms of also following up on emails that don't get answered. If you didn't get an answer within a week, you certainly feel free to send another email. You don't get another answer, didn't get an auto reply from the professors, then again, perhaps that's a clue that the professor is not interested. So go down your list. You can try again later, the same person, but go down your list so that you're not holding or waiting for someone who is not interested. And asking questions that can be answered with your online research. Again, this is absolutely a no-no. I've talked a little bit more about that. While it's good and you should be asking questions, avoid asking questions that can be easily found online. Many of my generation, yours certainly, can be different, but we expect things to be given to us, like everything. Whenever instead of spending the time finding an answer, we expect the answer to be ready. It's getting even worse with artificial intelligence, I guess, but spend your time doing your research. This really shows initiation, that you're prepared, and it shows a lot about a student. I think it goes, a long way, showing the professor that you are resourceful and you're not sending emails to a potential supervisor with questions, for example, on how to get admitted to the program. It's not the professor's job, as I've mentioned previously. Go to the university website, and if there's anything that's unclear, ask the admissions office, not the supervisor or the potential supervisor. Being impatient I've talked about that. If you don't receive an answer, just wait. relying on a single option. We've talked about that. Have a list of people so that you are not discouraged if you get a no or if you get a number of no's. And last but not least, lack of clarity. I think that when you're contacting a supervisor, make sure that your message is really clear, is direct, goes, on the scheme of the entire auspices of, finding someone, clearly expressing your interest, having a clear email, like first line, why are you writing that email? Because your email is probably going to be long because you're introducing yourself. But what are you like? What do you want? Do you want a master's position, a PhD position? When to have resources from your country? I'm going to talk about that next. Or you want a scholarship, because then the professor can spend the time understanding the context is given. So then the professor, in case it's other labs like the admin assistant or research coordinators, can then understand what your requirement, what your not requirements, but what your request is with that email. Remember that effective communication it goes a long way. Finding the supervisor is, to me, as I've mentioned before, the most important process because of the limited capacity. But really, being aware of these constraints and strategizing your approach can increase your chance of being successful. And my last slide is about financing your graduate studies. Graduate school can be quite expensive. So there are some options that are available. They are not necessarily, the same in each university, but overall, we have scholarships that are available. And this option that you should explore is sometimes may be more limited for international students. So national students may have a way greater number of scholarships they can apply for. But most universities will offer scholarships for international students. There are also external organizations that can provide financial aid. And most common, the professor is also paying for your salary. All the universities will give you a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship, where part of your salary comes from the work that you're going to do as a TA, teaching assistant, or an RA, a research assistant. And it can be also a combination of this plus a top up from the professor, for example, for you to conduct your research. It really, really varies. Some professors will pay for the entire program, and any extra in terms of teaching assistantship goes for the student as well. It's not going back to the research. So very variable, but again, important for you to have good grades to apply for awards and scholarships. It's important for you to remember they have strict deadlines as well for you to consider. In terms of government scholarships, I refer to those, for example, scholarships that you have from your own country that will finance your study abroad. Those go a long way in finding a supervisor. Those are excellent opportunities. If you do have that available in our country, make sure that you bring this up with the professor, because it's much easier for a professor to accept you if you have your own funding, because now the professor only has to offer you space and has to offer you money for or have a research project that you can work on. So this is very important. There are many countries where students from the Middle East, from Mexico, from Brazil, who have come with the scholarships, they are very successful in finding professors because, again, they have their own funding. So it's really easier for you to find a supervisor when you have your own this type of funding. Now, personal funds is another example. I would say this option is related to you paying for your own studies. So you're financing your own studies using your savings, your personal funds. And although this is a possible option for some students, it's very important to highlight that it's absolutely not very common in certain areas, for example, in degrees in nutrition. Because in our fields, professors, they usually only accept students if they can provide you with the finances. Some programs do not allow people to take students because we have seen students who say, oh, I can pay for my own, and they don't have a scholarship. So they have some savings to survive like 6 months and a year, and they think I'll figure something out when I'm there. But once they're here, the program is intense. There is no time for working outside of the scope of your research. And we have seen horrible cases of students actually being in financial need because of that. So many programs discourage, some programs do not even allow students to say, I'm going to pay for myself. So this is something to consider. Programs like MBA, which is not really the focus, or the expertise, I believe, of many people who are watching us, but MBA programs will allow for you to cover your tuition, but it's very different. The self-financing system is different because the courses are usually at night and you're working full-time. So you're making money to offset the cost of this program, which you don't have time when you're intensively working in a research project. On-campus work opportunities include the teaching assistant, the research assistantship that I've mentioned, but some people can work at some restaurants on campus, for example, at the bookstore. So there are different work activities that you can engage upon. And it's very important that while this may be a viable option at many universities, it may not be possible or recommended for all graduate students. Because again, graduate students are usually intensively working on their research program. They are committed to their research program, taking courses. So this can really make balancing study with work very difficult. And it can be quite challenging for students to meet these expectations. And importantly, most supervisors, or at least, I would say many supervisors, will certainly discourage work during your graduate studies, especially if they are paying for your salary. They want the students to fully focus on the research and fully focus on their studies. So before committing to working on campus or even considering that possibility, you have to discuss with your supervisor and carefully consider the workload, the demands of our program, and even if the supervisor would allow for that. Now we have come to an end of my lecture, and I really hope that the information and the tips that I shared today have been valuable and have provided you with a perspective on the application process for postgraduate programs in Canada and in the United States. Certainly, the application process is very complex. And while I hope to have given at least an overview of the process, my main goal today is to enhance the chances of your success. So I couldn't possibly address all aspects, but I at least want to give you some strategies, some tips to enhance the success, particularly in relation to the process of contacting a supervisor. This is where most students fail and instantly eliminate their chances of success. So I certainly understand that understanding this process, grasping this process is very difficult. I have been there, I've been through this process. Sometimes it's not clear, but do your research. As I said before, everything that you can work on to get ready, certainly do that. And before you emailing, for example, the admissions office asking for simple questions, for example, what's the tuition cost for international students? They may just send you a link of where this information is provided. So instead of doing that, do your research and do your calculations. So send an email and say, well, I've seen on this web page that this is the general tuition fee, and if my calculations are correct, this would be the value for international students. Is that correct? So you just can politely ask if your calculation is correct. So this increases your chance of getting a better response because they're seeing that you are trying to calculate it, trying to interpret the information that's online. So it goes a long way for you to getting a response that are more even targeted to your specific question. And I think that being persistent is essential. I think that no time that you invest on preparing yourself for applying is going to be wasted. The journey ahead is extremely challenging, but again, be persistent, have dedication, be resourceful. Those are definitely important things for you to reach success on this endeavor. I wish you a lot of success, in your applications, in your future academic careers. Thank you so very much for your attention. And if you'd like to hear more about the specific topics, you can certainly let them know. and I'll be happy to clarify any questions that you may have in the future in that instance. Thank you so very much for your attention, and see you next time.